Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to another episode of A Win is a Win podcast. I'm your host, Edgar Chaput. We're back, baby, with another episode. It's going to be a soccer-centric episode, which might be a bit of a funny time to record one. It's kickoff weekend in the National Football League. Should I not be recording something about that? It's also the international break in soccer, in the sense that it's a break for the clubs. There are no club competitions, at least in most parts of the world. Some competitions are still going on, but the good players have been called up by their national squads to represent their country's colors for either friendlies or games that do mean a few things down the line. I know in Europe they've changed the format a little bit. The international breaks are now for contests that will help determine who gets to play, for example, in European championships. So on that note, there was a game that happened in Kansas City on Saturday afternoon, a soccer game in Kansas City during the international break. What could that be? Well, glad you asked. Team Canada, now led by manager Jesse Marsch, who incidentally is an American and was in line to get the Team USA job, the men's national team. He's actually coaching Canada. And the Canadians emerged victorious 2-1. Do not be fooled by the final score. The contest was not nearly as close as that 2-1 score suggests. I saw a good chunk of it. I didn't see it live. I only found out what happened afterwards late last night. And Canada did look quite good. There was a lot of pressure. I felt as though there are quite a few things that need to be put into context in a match like this. Number one, it's a friendly. This is not a World Cup. This is not a World Cup qualifier. This is not a Copa America. It's not a CONCACAF League of Nations. It's not a Gold Cup. It's literally none of those things. This was a friendly. Yes, on American soil, and Team Canada had not put the Americans to the sword on their ground in apparently 67 years. So in that sense, I guess you could make the case that it was a, quote, historical, unquote, win, but a win that needs to be put into context. Number one, this was a friendly. Number two, the Americans are dealing with an interim head coach right now, Mikey Varas, who took over from Greg Berhalter. He, who was let go, he was given his pink slip after a rather porous performance at the Copa America just a few months ago. And third, as admirable as I felt Team Canada played, Kyle Larin was okay, Jonathan David was okay. Alphonso Davies maybe wasn't as big of a factor, but then again, he's playing a defenseman, a left back. Jacob Schaffelberg, I always struggle with his name, Jacob Schaffelberg. He was all right. He in fact scored the first goal. Jonathan David scored the second goal in the 58th minute. So Schaffelberg in the 17th, David in the 58th. So one goal in each half, which is nice to know. The production was consistent. That being said, both goals were courtesy of, let's be frank here, atrocious turnovers by the American defense. It's not that the starting 11 for the Americans wasn't very good. They simply didn't play very well. So not a good performance. It was a friendly. Both goals came courtesy off of turnovers. And from what I could tell, I tried to see as much as I could from this game. From what I could tell, from the Canadian perspective at least, it looked like another one of those games where the Canadian midfield is actually pretty decent, and the forwards have good ball movement, good dribbling. They play off the ball relatively well. They tend to put themselves in positions to receive solid passes that create scoring opportunities. The Canadians do a lot of things relatively well, but they cannot finish. Yes, Jonathan David finally scored. he missed chances. Kyle Laren missed chances. Schaffelberg missed one or two chances. It wasn't great. A win is a win. That's fine. Hey, that's the name of the show. A win is a win. But I felt like they were the benefactors of somewhat of a lackadaisical American team that committed, obviously, extremely costly turnovers. If Jesse Marsch and his staff can get this group, the Canadians that is, if they can get this group to just put the ball in the back of the net a little bit more often, with a little bit more regularity, consistency, then I genuinely think the Canadian men's national team can be, I won't go so far as to say a threat. They're not that good, but I think they can be taken a bit more seriously. Whereas right now, these days, I just don't think it's a side that many rivals consider particularly threatening. And for that matter, the stadium was half empty. I saw the images, I saw the pictures, I've already listened to some of the discussions, like on ESPN FC, that dove into what happened in this game. They took a slightly more American approach, since the ESPN is an American station. But nevertheless, they talked about the game, and yeah, the support was really poor. Granted, the U.S. players didn't give the few people who showed up much to cheer about, but there was maybe an underlying sense that the U.S. men's national team fans sniffed out a rotten deal that somebody tried to sell them. You know, it's an interim manager. The team just isn't playing all that well these days. It's a friendly. With all due respect to Team Canada, let's be honest, and I say this as someone from Canada, I'm interested in the Canadian team, but let's be frank, let's call it how it is. Faut appeler un chat un chat. Most of the world doesn't care about Team Canada. You know, you're not going to sell more tickets because the visiting team is Team Canada. It's not going to happen. It never has happened, and I'm afraid it never will happen. So I think a lot of things resulted in that stadium being a little bit empty. It sounds like I'm poo-pooing the entire afternoon. It's still a win. It was still a good performance. Hopefully Jesse Marsch and his staff and the players find a way to just be a little bit more consistent and more clinical in their finishing. Because I like a lot of what I see. It's not great, but I like a lot of what I see. But they are lacking in the final third, and that tends to be what haunts them, and that's, as a good example of that is what haunted them this past July at the Copa America. The second reason why I wanted to record this episode on the weekend of the international break is specifically, and this might also sound strange, but specifically because the clubs are not playing. I feel as though some of the teams, the popular teams, of course, have some interesting narratives surrounding them in the media, among fan bases, on social media. Even though we're only a few weeks into the domestic league competitions, there are some interesting storylines that are emerging. I don't want to take all day talking about these. I like to make these episodes as bite-sized as I can. In Spain, it's funny. Last weekend, I was listening to another podcast, and they were discussing what was going on in La Liga. Specifically between Barcelona and Real Madrid. Barcelona are undefeated through 4 games. Their goal differential is a stupendous +10. Now, to be fair, they did beat a team. They did beat a team 7-0, Real Valladolid. Now, Real Villa. I'm sorry, Real Valladolid. It's not a name I say very often, so I apologize if I blundered that one. They just got promoted. They were actually in the second division last year. So that Barcelona would incinerate them 7-0 maybe shouldn't be too surprising, but to Valladolid's credit, they happened to play Real Madrid relatively tough a bit earlier in the season. And actually, to their credit, they do have 3 points. Let's see what happened. They have already defeated Espanyol. That was actually their opening game. They beat them 1-0. And they earned a draw versus Leganes. I'm generally not sure how you're supposed to say that. That is not a team name that I'm familiar with at all. But nevertheless, 4 points. Now granted a -9 goal differential. But back to Barcelona and Real Madrid. I was listening to this podcast, and this was last weekend, so those games had been played. Real Madrid actually only have 8 points. They have 2 victories and 2 draws. It took a little while for Kylian Mbappe to get going. He actually did not score at all during the first 3 games of the season, but he netted a brace last week against Real Betis. He scored once in the 67th minute and then earned his brace in a 76th minute penalty kick. In fact, it was actually Vinicius Jr. that handed him the ball, so I guess he wanted old Kylian Mbappe to find his rhythm. But he finally, and also that game was at the Estadio Santiago Bernabéu, so the fans got to cheer his name, which, as I understand it, was a childhood dream of his. I mean, look, good for him, good for Madrid. They might have a little bit of wind in their sails at this point, but the conversation on that podcast was, should predictions be changed? People said Real Madrid should win La Liga. Barcelona almost have no chance because of their money issues, because they haven't been able to register all their players, even though they still have some rather good players like Rafinha, like Robert Lewandowski, like Lamine Yamal. They're not lacking in good play. Pedri is another one who's quite good. It's a nice lineup. But I think that's what a lot of people thought at the start of the season. It's a nice lineup. Whereas Real Madrid with Valverde, Rodrigo, Vinicius Jr., now Kylian Mbappe, Jude Bellingham, Camavinga, and on and on and on and on and on, Luka Modric. It's a ginormous team. It's a gigantic team. Los Gigantes. And here we are, 4 games into the campaign, and it's actually Barcelona that have a 4-point advantage over their domestic rivals with a considerably superior goal differential. And I find it interesting when the media does that. When the media starts... It was the type of conversation where I felt that sometimes the media doesn't know what to talk about, but they need to churn out some kind of content, any kind of content, as long as it is related in some capacity with the sport or the topic that they are paid to discuss or write about or film about, then no conversation is moot. No question is dumb. No question is superfluous. I thought it was a bit of a superfluous question. I mean, why should expectations be managed because Barcelona lead Madrid by 4 points after 4 matches? It's a long season. Whoever wins La Liga lifts that trophy in May. It's September. Let's calm down a little bit here. Now, I do think that Hansi Flick has done a very interesting job so far through 4 games. 4 games. But he has done a very interesting job. This Barcelona team seems to have a bit more guts than they used to. They've won twice on the road. They had to come back in one of those games. They won close games. They grinded those games out. They're pretty good, but I do feel as though Madrid, it's just a matter of time before they find their wings. And I think when you insert a player of Mbappe's caliber into a lineup, there is going to be that risk that it will take some time for chemistry to gel. It's not because Mbappe is arguably the best player on the planet right now that his presence alone automatically makes Real Madrid better from day one. Clearly, that's not the case because they've won 2 games and drawn 2 through 4 matches and trail Barcelona by 4 points. So if everything just happened instantaneously, well, Real Madrid would be leading La Liga by tons of points and their goal differential would be plus 15 and everybody would be heaping praises and showering praise on them. And yet that's not the case. I do think it's just a matter of time. Carlo Ancelotti is one of the best in the business, if not the best in the business. He'll find a way. I'm not particularly worried. I'm not going to hold my breath on Barcelona preserving this lead, even though it is a 2-game lead. A win gives you 3 points in soccer. So it is a 2-game lead since their advantage is 4 points. But I'm not going to hold my breath on Barcelona leading the standings, the table, for the entire season. I don't think anybody would be surprised if Madrid overturned this not too great a deficit at some point, possibly in the near future. So let's just calm down. Let's cool off that narrative that all the problems of Barcelona are solved and Real Madrid suddenly don't have chemistry and tactically they're not sound. They'll figure out a way to get Mbappe going. Of that, I nor you should have any doubts. And there are 2 narratives in England that I find quite interesting. The first being how well Liverpool has started the season, which, make no mistake about it, they absolutely have. Mohamed Salah and Luis Diaz are tearing up the pitch. They really, really are. 1 game less has been played in England, whereas the La Liga has played 4 contests. In the English Premier League, only 3 have been played. Both Liverpool and Manchester City are at the top with 9 points each. They're both undefeated, and they actually both have a plus 7 goal differential. They both have teams. They both have players who are going absolutely bonkers with goals. Obviously, Erling Haaland for Manchester City, who scored back-to-back hat-tricks. Yes, you heard that correctly. Back-to-back hat-tricks in weeks 2 and 3. In fact, some of the goals he scored against West Ham in week 3 were sensational. Can't remember if it was the first or the second where he hit it with his left from just outside the box and it flew like a cannonball in the top corner. That was sensational. But Mohamed Salah and Luis Diaz are doing their thing for Liverpool. And of course, the narrative about Liverpool is, can they win the Premier League title this season with Arne Slot as their manager? Slot obviously taken over from Jurgen Klopp, who left at the end of the previous campaign. So far, so good. It's funny. It's only 3 games. The sample size with Schlott is so much smaller than with Klopp. Klopp and Schlott. It sounds like a disgusting drink. Ugh. It's a very small sample size under Schlott, but I do like the way they're playing. They're playing fast. I like their possession. Their possession football has been quite good so far. But a bit like Barcelona, I don't want to get too excited. The reality is also that much more so in the Premier League than in La Liga, and I don't mean to disparage La Liga in any shape or form, but I think even La Liga fans will recognize this. You really can drop points on any given match day in England. You absolutely can drop points on any match day. You never know when you're really going to drop points. That sneaky away game that you think is going to be easy, but because you're the big bad club in town, well, the hosts, who maybe don't have as much talent as you, and they don't have the coaching staff that you do, well, they just grind it out, and they halt you to a 0-0 draw or a 1-1 draw, or they surprise you with a 2-1 win. I want to see more from this Liverpool team. As much as I've enjoyed what I've seen so far, I think they've been very good through 3 weeks. It's a long season, and I'd like to know if they can keep up with this style, because it's been ruthlessly efficient through 3 games. Of course, the cherry on the top of this youthful 2024 campaign was the visit to Old Trafford last weekend, where they absolutely demolished Manchester United 3-0. Could have been worse. An early Trent Alexander-Arnold goal was waved off because of offside. Yes, United created a few chances in the latter stages, but Liverpool pretty much had that game in hand. So good stuff from Liverpool so far, but I'd like to see a little bit more. And lastly, and I'll just spend a couple minutes on this because the episode is getting a bit long in the tooth here, is Chelsea Football Club. Not because Chelsea are playing especially well, although they did have a stupendous 6-2 win at Wolves a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, I don't think Pedro Neto played in that game. Pedro Neto, who was with Wolverhampton a year ago and is now wearing Chelsea colours. Chelsea right now are 1-1-1, so they've won a game, they've lost a game, they've drawn a game. But even though they've drawn and lost a game, that 6-2 victory has still given them a +2 goal differential. They have 4 points, pretty much middle of the table. The narrative surrounding Chelsea Football Club has been their very curious dealings in the transfer window this off-season. They have, I believe, over 40 registered players, which is complete madness. I agree with that. That is utter madness. But there might be some... I'm trying to defend them here in the sense that there could be some rhyme and reason to the madness. And hear me out. Obviously, one of the bigger problems is the fact that when you have so many players, a lot of them are signed for like 6 or 7 year deals. It's a very strange setup over there at Chelsea. But when you have that many players, I have to imagine that they think that most of these players are pretty good. You know, are they great? Maybe Cole Palmer can find a way to be great. João Felix, João Felix is who he is at this point. You know, Nicholas Jackson seems to be playing a little bit better this season, a little bit better. They just got Sancho from Manchester United. They just got rid of Raheem Sterling. Sterling is with Arsenal right now. But they do have a lot of players. They have a lot of forwards. It's actually quite unbelievable how many forwards they have. Let's take a look at this squad right here, particularly the forward position. They have David Datro Fofana, 21 years old. They have Pedro Neto, 24 years old. Noni Madueke, 22. João Felix, 24. Nicholas Jackson, 23. Christopher Nkuku, 26. Jadon Sancho, 24. And then they have the kids, Tyreek George, who's 18. David Washington, who's 19. Omari Kellerman, who's 18. And Mark Guyu. Guyu? How should that be pronounced? I'm not sure. Who's 18 as well. That's an incredible number of forwards. A lot of them are very young. I think for a manager like Maresca, the deal is going to be, I think this season, as much as it might be frustrating for some of the players who are on that lineup, it's going to be a matter of finding out what should this team look like in a year from now. 2 years from now. I think when you have so many players on a roster, although the juggling act is very difficult, and I certainly don't envy Maresca for being in that situation, but if you look at the silver lining, it could be an opportunity to take the entire season to really understand, what do you have, where are your strong players, where are your weak spots, and go from there. Am I saying that 2024, 2025 is a bit of a wash? Maybe. But through the growing pains of 24, 25, maybe 25, 26 could be an interesting season for Chelsea. I don't feel like limiting myself to just bashing Chelsea for as strange and at times perplexing as their off-season wheeling and dealing has been, and it most certainly has. I'm strangely interested in seeing how that plays out at Stamford Bridge. There you have it. That was another episode of A Win is a Win podcast. I have been your host, Edgar Chaput. We talked about a lot. I tried to make it as quick as possible. Did about 4 or 5 subjects in about 25 minutes. It's about as quickly as I can do them. I hope you enjoyed the episode, obviously. Check us out on YouTube. My channel is Edgar Chaput 1793. I'm on Facebook. It's just my name. I'm also on X, formerly Twitter. I'm Edgar Chaput 1983. The podcast itself is available on Spotify for podcasters, Apple Music, or Apple Podcasts rather, Amazon Music for podcasters, YouTube, of course. So check us a little bit everywhere, and we will catch you very, very soon. Take care, guys.